Catherine?
No, we do not have Catherine today. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And just to clarify on the agenda, we do the call to order. We'll go to roll call. We'll do an operations committee report. The Justice and Equity Committee has been postponed to next week, and there's still conversations about that and the timing. But then we will go into the revisiting of the elected versus appointed of the sheriff discussion. So several of you had asked to revisit that conversation. And I'm just curious, who wants to lead off on that conversation? One of the people voting in favor to bring that back to our agenda, or do we want to do elected versus appointed overview of their discussion first, which I think could be helpful if elected versus appointed is prepared to do that.
Maureen here? Yeah.
I'm here. I had the phone was ringing. We can begin. We're happy to do that if that's what you want.
It may be helpful just to recap.
Sure.
Because you spent a lot of time on it, thinking about it and so on, and then we can go into discussion from some other folks. And if I could ask, if you're a member of the public, if you are, if you could please turn off your video and mute yourself. And that allows the commissioners to be prioritized in Zoom, just so we can see each other when we're voting and such. When we get to public comment, we'll ask you to come back on with your video if it's possible. Sheriff, I see that you're saying your camera's not working. Do you want to hang up and try and call back in?
I just did that and it didn't work. So
okay.
I'm not sure what's going on with us. So
okay.
I'm not the most savvy guy.
That's all right. That's all right. That's not what you were elected for.
Kevin, you're frozen.
And I actually, without Catherine, I'm frozen.
You're now okay. Now you're all right.
Really? That's odd. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try and do the roll call here. Just going through. So I'm just gonna go across on my screen. So Dave Anderson.
Here.
Dick Grout.
He's here.
And yes, and then Kyle Davies.
Present.
And then Maureen C.
Here.
Janet Burnell.
Here.
Paul Dossett.
Here.
David Dillendorf.
Here.
Patty Garcia.
Here.
Sharon Abreu.
Here.
Olivia Roseberry.
Here.
Bob O'Connell.
Here.
Jane Fuller.
Here.
Liz Lafferty.
Present.
And Tony Gazelle. And those are the
Present.
members. Thank you, Tony. Sorry, I interrupted you. I didn't mean to. Those are the members that we see present today. So others will be absent at this point.
So you are freezing.
We'll recognize them if they join. So I mean, am I really?
Yeah.
That is not good, which is strange since I have full bandwidth here. So will you guys let me know if I freeze again, please? And why don't we go ahead and we don't have any minutes to approve because those were already done last night for both meetings. So we're going to go straight into the presentation from the operations committee. So who's going to take the lead for the operations committee?
Paul Dossett.
Yay, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to just quickly, I'm going to log out and come back in on a different Wi-Fi and see if it works a little better. So will one of the other hosts please let me back in when you do so? Oh, go ahead, Kyle.
Does that mess up your recording?
Oh gosh. Yeah, maybe it will. Thank you. Never mind. I'll stay here and you guys tell me if I freeze. Okay.
Sorry.
Paul, please go ahead.
Well, the operations committee met with you back in April of 21, April 21st, and we presented to you several proposals, and we're back again today. We have a small committee made up of three of Patty Garcia, Maureen C, and myself. And we have a motto, and I'd like to tell you that we may be small, but we are mighty. So we'll start with the first one, and Maureen, do you want to take that one?
I'm going to try and share screen here. Do you want me to do that?
Sure.
That would be helpful.
Let's see if I can do it. Oh, I am not having any luck here. Okay. I'm just going to take it. I've sent it out to everybody and I can't seem to get it to open on this. For some reason, this has been a problem for me.
It
The
won't let you share screen, or it won't, I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's
you.
just not giving me I've got it opened on my desktop, but it's not allowing me to share. Let's see.
I just made you a co-host too. We're gonna have so many, everybody's gonna be a host today. So let's see if you can now as a co-host.
I don't know what's happening. I can't, and I don't want to take up your, oh, let's see what this is.
How does that work?
That might work. No, that's not helping.
No,
Rather than hold everybody up, I did send it out, and if you can bear with me doing it verbally. And I feel like I'm in Groundhog Day, that we've done this like 5 times. I mean, I'm not sure what it is, but we're going to do it. Our first task that is a recommendation to the full council is to add language to the personnel manual that all departments are bound by the same rules. We had a full vote on that, all ayes. And it turned out, and it was specifically directed at electeds. We wanted to make sure that electeds had to follow the same rules as all employees. So it turns out, after a bunch of situations, that officials are indeed exempt from following those rules. And it's a matter of law. There is there's a law citation. A district court judge upheld that, or no, the Supreme Court upheld that a district court judge did not have to follow the personnel rules. So what we decided was, it was disappointing because we believe that San Juan County's personnel manual should apply to all employees, including electeds, but we understand that it's a matter of law. So as a remedy for that, we thought it would be helpful for future commissions to have this language put into the charter. And we recommend language that would include this situation. As a matter of law, an elected official is generally answerable only to the voters and to their oath of office. And in a cited case in Crossler versus Hill, the Washington State Supreme Court held that a district court judge was not bound by the county employment handbook. So given that, it is our recommendation to the full CRC that you support this proposal and that it be made an amendment to the charter.
Questions or comments for Maureen or other members of the committee on this subject? Any? David, please.
Since we can't do what you originally proposed, is there any reason to put anything in the charter? I mean, the court ruling rules whether it's in the charter or not. I don't know. We're citing a Supreme Court ruling in the charter. I don't think that. I don't understand doing that.
Maureen, would you like to respond?
Yeah, the reason would be so that future CRCs don't get caught in the same rabbit hole that we do. We wanted to make a statement saying this is why electeds are exempt from this rule. And we think that that's an important thing to do. This has been vetted through Amy Vera, so she was able to help come up with the language that would accomplish what we were hoping to do.
Okay, Bob.
I agree with David as far as not needing to put it here. A good place to put it might be at the beginning of the personnel manual itself, to say that those people are not, don't have to follow these rules.
Other questions or comments? Or Maureen, do you want to respond to that? And
There
then-
is a section in the charter that speaks to it's Article 8, Section 8.20, which says these are the exemptions for this for the rules. And that's where it says, but it just says electeds are exempt, period. It doesn't give any explanation.
Oh, I see.
Kyle and then Dick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the work. One concern that comes to mind is the number of amendments and the potential that some of these distract from some of the bigger ones. I'm not sure how to fix that. I think it does call for some addition in that particular charter section, but I do worry about the volume of amendments and things pieces before the voting public.
Dick, and then I'd like to call myself.
My reaction is this is probably a good thing because it's 10 years until the next charter review, barring anything unexpected. And people forget, and the new Charter Review Commission isn't necessarily going to read everything we did. But I have sympathy with what Kyle just said. So what if we approve this, which I'm inclined to do, with the understanding that when we get to the end of our whole process, if we have too many proposed amendments, this is one we could let go.
Thank you. If folks don't mind, I'd like to call myself on this one. A couple of things come to mind. One is the point Kyle just raised, which I think is important. But the other thing for me, and Europe actually just put this in chat too, having been an elected official in the legislature recognized this and adopted our own rules as elected officials. And for me, I'm starting to feel like, and I know that this would be a brand new idea, but it might be worthwhile to consider a recommendation to every elected official on the council that they sign. We actually had to sign an oath or an agreement that we recognized our own rules, and they were identical to our employees. And so while the Supreme Court has said that we can't mandate an elected official to follow the same rules, we could ask our elected officials to actually sign an oath as a recommendation to them. They're independently elected, so they make their own mind up, which is what the Supreme Court ruled, or the undercourt, and then Supreme Court upheld. But we could do a recommendation saying we would like to ask you to sign, actually, and not volunteer has been put in the chat, but actually sign something saying, listen, I'm following the same rules as my employees. I just think that shows good leadership. It might be something to consider, but my other issue is that we have a lot of things coming down. And last night, some people made comments too about, how many do we want to limit? I think it was David Dellendorf. I recognize why the committee has put this forward though, so that there's less confusion. So if it were to go forward, I would say that we revisit it as Dick suggested as well. Others? David?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Kevin, about trying to get the elected to do this voluntarily. I mean, that section 8.20 already excludes elected officers, and I don't think we need to editorialize in the charter. I mean, if you did it here, you could argue you could do it all kinds of other places. Why don't we editorialize why independent contractors are exempt and boards and commissions and stuff? I mean, it opens up a can of worms to me. So why are we doing it here and not every place else? And I just think it's unnecessary. It doesn't achieve anything.
I've got Dick and then Bob.
Kevin, I prefer your suggestion to mine, so I would support that.
Okay, I've got Bob and then Jane.
I understand that sounds like a good suggestion, but I spent about 15 years immersed in the personnel section, part of this, what you're talking about over in state government in Tennessee. And I can tell you that if we had people who were not subject to the rules over here, and they said at one point they stood over here and took an oath, I'm voluntarily making myself subject to the rules, and it came time to discipline that person for something under the rules. No way, it wouldn't work. You'd have to go by the rules only. So that could be problematic. Although, as far as kind of morally, it's probably a good idea.
I've got Bob. That was Bob. Sorry, I've got Jane and then Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our presentation, our Justice and Equity presentation next Thursday, our committee was actually going to make a proposal for an additional sort of clause under 8.20 that would just have some language that states that although these these those who are exempt under clause 8 point or under section 8.20, there is still the expectation that the manner in which they conduct themselves, upholds some basic, basic principles along the lines of what you're talking about. So we're still working on that, and I could get in touch with Amy Vera and let her know what we were suggesting. I've seen a similar kind of clause in, I believe it's the Pierce County section of their charter in 8.20. And so it just basically says, although you are exempt, there's still the expectation that you uphold certain values. And so I can share that next week. I can run it through Amy, and then we can offer that to the commission next week if you'd like.
Okay, thank you for that. And I should clarify that it was put in the chat, but my understanding on this is that our elected officials at this point in time are doing this voluntarily. I think what we're talking about now is trying to formalize that, but I wanted to clarify that I don't think any of us is suggesting that this isn't being followed now. I think it's important that it be underscored. Jane, did you have a follow-up before I go to Paul?
Yeah, just a follow-up. And I appreciate what Marlene's saying, but we, as we all also appreciate, we're thinking about 10, 15, 20 years out. So we're trying to, suggested changes are with a view to the future, not with current staff.
Of course, thank you for that. Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when my first term as the county assessor, I too, Kevin, I signed a document along with the others. I could see this document had all the elected official signatures on it, and we were all taking oath that we were going to follow the personnel policy. So just to let you know that it's been going on for quite a while.
Yeah. I remember that from when I was there, actually. So yeah. Wonderful. We're going to go to David.
If we were to do what you proposed, Kevin, would it be just an obligation that is voluntarily undertaken by the current incumbent, or would it go with the office in the future indefinitely, no matter who is in that office? Because I'm concerned it might just be for the person signing and it doesn't obligate the office itself. How do you address that?
So there's two things. One is, to Bob's point from earlier, legally, because of the Supreme Court ruling, if there were somebody who was going to be questioned with regard to those rules, there would be a lack of ability to actually enforce them. And we can have Amy chime in if I'm wrong on that. And then the second thing is, no elected official is able to encumber a future elected official. And so if a current county council person signs something, that just by no means means that the next council person or the next council person from that district or so on that would be part of that as well. So so the answer to that is no, this would only be voluntary. And what I'm thinking, and I'll let you follow up. Well, David, go ahead and make your follow up, and then I have a suggestion to maybe move.
Thanks for clarifying. It's not a permanent thing. It's just a temporary thing. It could, if somebody resigns tomorrow from one of those offices, then that's the end of it for that office. So it's not a permanent solution, which is troubling. Yeah, thank you.
Because of the court case. Maureen, I saw your hand up.
No, my hand is just trying to cool myself off from the amount of comments on this. That's all.
Okay. My suggestion, and Randy, I see you've got your video on. So if there's something you need to chime in on, let me know in just one sec. My suggestion to move us forward was going to be that we can call here's the options. We could call the question on this and see if there's support for the recommendation from the subcommittee, and which technically, according to our rules, we should consider that. But we also heard from the co-chair of the Justice and Equity Committee that a very similar subject will be coming before us next Thursday that may address this. And I am being on that committee. I know that committee has spent some time thinking about other alternatives. And I appreciate the idea of Jane, sitting down virtually with Amy and kind of discussing language and maybe coming back with that. So I think there's two potential options before us. One is to call the question now on this, and one will be to wait until next week and see what comes back, which may get at kind of this nuanced idea that we're bringing forward. Before I ask for commissioners' thoughts on what direction you'd like to head, Randy, did you have something you wanted to chime in on this?
Yeah, just briefly, this was covered in great detail in 2017 when the current set of personnel rules were developed. And at that time, there was a thought of having each of the elected officials sign on to a set of personnel rules that all of them could abide by. And that is for them to administer their offices. The personnel rules consist of three parts. One is a restatement of many of the general laws that exist in Washington State and from Congress. And those we all abide by because we take an oath of office. Second, they deal with financial consequences, money. And those policies and procedures are determined by the Board of County Commissioners because they have power over that. The third part deals with the discipline of employees who report to an elected official. And that is fully within the discretion of the elected official. And then the question is, what then applies to the elected official himself or herself? Well, the discipline rules don't apply to an elected official. The financial side of things are dealt with through the general policies of the county and so on. And then and through the county commissioners. So, and then all of the other rules are adopted through our oath of office. So there's a good deal that's already incorporated, applied.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. And just to clarify one thing, Randy, you said county commissioners. I think you meant council, or is there?
Yes, yeah, the legislative body.
Right. Okay. Thank you. At least I'm not the only one who still says that. Okay. So with that information, then, before I ask for a motion, I'd like to just get a feeling from folks on where the commission is on this. Would folks like to wait and see what the Justice and Equity Commission comes back with next week after speaking to Amy or the prosecutor's office, or would folks like to call the question from the recommendation now?
Wait.
Tony?
Can you please review the recommendation? I might have, so the recommendation is to have something in the charter that says that elected officials have, please review the recommendation.
Maureen, would you please summarize the recommendation
I
again?
think our recommendation or the recommendation that,
As I understand Tony's question, it's the subcommittee's recommendation.
the subcommittee's recommendation was to, as a matter of law, an elected official is generally answerable only to the voters and to their oath of office. And then in a legal citation, the Supreme Court upheld that an elected official is not bound by the county employment handbook.
Thank you, Maureen. Mr. Chair, so what are we going to be?
So if I may respond, Tony, so procedurally, because it's a recommendation from a subcommittee, I kind of feel like we should actually vote it up or down because it's a formal recommendation at this point, and the subcommittee has referred it to us. So I feel like procedurally we should have some action. However, what I was suggesting is if there's a consensus to not take action on this and delay until we hear from the Justice and Equity Commission on the same subject matter next week, then I would say that we don't necessarily, as long as folks agree, that we don't necessarily need to call the question. Otherwise, we could call the question and see if there's votes to put it in. I see Dick and David and Bob, but before I go to you, Tony, does that answer your question?
Just hearing, I'm sorry that I might have frozen for a second, but hearing what Maureen Maureen said, it doesn't seem to me that there's anything that we can vote on. This is just a statement of what the conditions are currently. So what exactly are we going to be voting on? Just to move it forward to discuss it further?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tony, but the recommendation from the subcommittee was to add language to the charter that specifically states why county elected officials are not under the same procedures. And there was
Why they're exempt.
why they're exempt. Thank you. And then the back and forth was that there's already a lot of recommendations being discussed. And so just the weight of adding more, I believe it was David raised the point of if this is already implied, it's already understood. So why do we have to put it in the charter? And I believe and anybody correct me if I'm wrong on these summarizations. And I believe the subcommittee's recommendation was put it in the charter so that future charter review commissions understand why we didn't take action. So those are the different things. And now I have Dick and David and Bob.
So
Thank
my
you.
suggestion would be, rather than spend any more time on this issue, which is actually of very little consequence, why don't we put it off and wait until we see what Justice and Equity comes up with, so we don't spend time discussing essentially the same issue twice?
David?
I agree with Dick. We've got a duplicate effort going on here, and I think this issue is better handled by the Justice and Equity Department or our subcommittee. And so I would move, I'm not going to, but I would argue we could just not move this forward, that we move against it. We recommend not doing it, and let the Justice and Equity people flesh it out. If we've got two different subcommittees working on this, we're going to end up with continuing discussions, because there's going to be different language coming out of each one of them, and then we got to reconcile it.
Got it.
Why don't we just leave it to the responsibility of the Justice and Equity subcommittee, what I believe.
Okay, Bob?
I've got a question, Mr. Chairman, for either Randy or Amy, if I could put it, about, it's a legal question about.
They're both still here, so. if
Okay. Thank you,
Please
Mr.
go ahead.
Chairman. I have not read this particular case. Is this line in here accurate, that the Washington State Supreme Court held that a district court judge was not bound by the county employment handbook?
That is correct. That is a correct
Well, a
statement.
district court judge isn't a county employee. Do you mean in his decision he wasn't bound by it, or he
Yes.
personally was not bound by it?
His office is not bound by it.
Well,
The district court judge is not the federal district court judge. It's the
Right.
local judge, court of limited jurisdiction judge. And so they are both a state and constitutional officer, and all of their employees are employed through the collective bargaining agreement, usually with the county council members. And so the question is, to what extent is that person bound by all of those policy provisions, and to what extent are other elected officials also bound by those policy provisions? And so that, and together with other cases, provide, with respect to the elected official, that the elected official is not bound by the policy manual, at least the portions of the policy manual that address things that are specific as to discipline.
so Randy, it wouldn't be a distinguishing characteristic that this particular individual is not a county elected official?
The case has been interpreted with respect to the sheriff and sheriff deputies through an attorney general opinion as well.
Oh,
So
I
it's
see, I
been
see.
widely interpreted in connection with another statute, RCW 36-16070, which is the general appointment statute that applies for all elected officials, for all of them.
Thank you, Randy. That clears it up for me.
Okay, so unless there's an objection from the subcommittee, what I'd like to recommend is that we hold off on taking action on this and wait until next Thursday's presentation from the Justice and Equity Commission and see if there's a kind of compromise solution. But I don't want to discredit or dismiss the work and the effort put in by the subcommittee. So I really would like just to make sure that the subcommittee feels okay with that.
I'm okay with it. Are you, Maureen?
I'm ready for the ejector seat button to kind of stop this conversation. Just thinking. I am fine with that. And I know that because of the way these tasks were assigned, there are some overlaps, and we can certainly work with that.
Okay, Jane, I see your hand up, and then I'm going to cut it off.
I just wanted to say that I think the fact that both committees got a bit stumped by this and we're looking into it suggests that, you know, it's worthy of doing something. And I also wanted to let everybody know that Maureen and I have, as two different committees, we have been in communication with one another, and because we found a little bit of overlap in our work, so we've been trying to coordinate. So
yeah,
wonderful. I see a couple other hands, but if we can move on.
Can I make a motion?
I don't know if we need one at this point, but yeah, please.
Well, I'm going to make
go
the motion that we drop this, that we vote negatively on the recommendation of the Operations Committee and that we take it up later on, the same issue with the Justice and Equity Committee, and not have duplicate efforts.
I don't see why that's necessary.
We were just doing that by consensus, but if there's a second, is there a second to that motion? I don't see a second, so I believe the motion fails. Okay, I do not see a second, so the motion fails. So by consensus, David, I think we're doing the same thing you were just suggesting in the motion now. So I think we can just move on.
Not true. Thank you.
Okay, I apologize for misinterpreting that. So with that, Maureen, we'll go back to you for the next recommendation.
Okay,
And-
is that okay, Paul?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, Paul. Sorry, it was Paul. Not
That's
Maureen.
all right. That's all right.
And David, if there's something I missed, please let me know in chat, and I'm happy to come back and revisit it if I missed something, if I misunderstood something.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Patty, I see your hand up. You're muted.
I could try to share the screen for this next one if you wanted.
Patty,
That's
thank you.
great.
I would really appreciate that. It's not,
me
I'm
see
not
if I
able to
can.
do it. Thank you.
Okay, let's see, what is it? And it would be,
And let the record know that Tom Starr has joined the meeting. Let the
And
record-
can I recommend, in the interest of time, that if Patty succeeds, that we not read everything? People can read themselves. No
Yes.
criticism, Maureen. I'm just concerned about time.
Yep. And this was also sent out to commissioners, and we're
Yeah.
supposed
did it work?
to do our homework.
Yes, Patty, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Okay,
So,
before we, Kevin, may I proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay, I just want to make a comment. The operations committee had their list of tasks, and on each and every one of them, it was our goal to look at the task and apply it to the charter and make amendments as we saw fit as a committee that worked. We weren't trying to create new positions, and we weren't trying to create a new department. We were just trying to stay within the confines of the charter. And that's what you're going to see coming up here. These were ideas, and we're proposing them, and several of them are for recommendation. I hope we can get through it faster than this last one, because that was the easiest one. Okay.
Please.
The next one is public records. And this is a request to the full commission to be treated as an amendment because it was our decision that the county has failed to put enough of department records online for public view. And I have been a part personally of 2 departments that was involved in scanning projects and software projects that were going to allow the county council's proceedings and the planning department's proceedings to be made available online. That has not happened. And it's my understanding that in translating the 2, there were some big problems that occurred. However, this has been years and years and years. And it was our decision as a committee that there would have been less need for public records requests if these records were made readily available to the public. So this is a recommendation for new language in section 1050 regarding public records that requires the county, and again, this was vetted by Amy, and she helped change the language to be appropriate, that the county should maintain a means to store and maintain and make it access both prompt and retrievable for the public. That's our request to you.
Thank you, Maureen. Questions for Maureen or Paul or the committee? And I'm scrolling through quickly. So I'm not seeing hands. Could you voice if you have your hand up? Bob.
Just to facilitate discussion, I'd like to make a motion that this amendment be accepted.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Janet, please.
I'm just curious, it says the county department shall strive to obtain maximum accessibility of their records. So the new amendment would mandate that everything be digitized and put online. It just, the departments will strive to make that happen. Because digitizing all past documents the departments have is going to be hugely expensive. So I'm just wondering if it's mandating that they do this immediately, or they're striving to do this.
I actually had a similar question because it says should instead of shall.
I know. May I answer?
Yeah, please, Maureen.
Okay, so this is the language that Amy suggested, which I think is much better. This is not going to pertain to every department. Obviously, courts and other areas, they can't put their records online in the same way that the planning department can, or the county council can. And so that's why the language says they shall strive to do so, because it is a huge thing. However, the county has already spent a lot of money in trying to make these records accessible, but they just haven't connected the dots. Does that answer your question, Janet? Thank you.
Others?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Kyle and then David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next line down for the group, to the extent feasible, frequently accessed records. Who in the committee's mind, or maybe in Amy's mind, deems which ones are frequent?
Well, there are excuse me.
Please go ahead, Maureen.
I think we could ask Amy to weigh in on this, but there are rules about what records are required by the state or federal law. And I would ask Amy to weigh in on that, because that's a good question for her.
Amy, do you care to weigh in at this point?
Sure, I'm happy to briefly address these questions, and they're good questions. Maureen and I struggled with them as well. And the reason why the language is, I would say, squishy, is because of the reasons that Maureen just explained, that if you mandate this, it will be impossible. And one way to think about it is that as soon as a record is created by a government body, it's public. So we've talked about this in the context of the CRC, right? Think of all the records you guys have created. It wouldn't be possible for us to get those online. It would stop your operations. All you would be doing is putting records online and not getting any business done. And so as I understand the committee's intent, it was to provide guidance and direction as to what we want to see from these departments. We want them to prioritize this. We want them to get these records. They well know which ones are frequently accessed because they're getting public records requests daily, hourly for those records. And those are the records that should be prioritized to be put online. But it is true. This is not language that has mandates or can be enforced in a very specific way. It's striving language.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Others have questions or comments on this? I'm not seeing any. I'm sorry. I think after Bob was Kyle. Kyle, you went. So David, did you go?
Yeah, I have a Maureen. Everything after the first sentence, clarify for me, if we're following state law, we're required to follow state law. That's what's stated in the first sentence. But after that, are these things that you've outlined here in a couple of sentences, are they above and beyond what's required by state law? Is that why they're being put in here? Because we want to have further for public record retention, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And this is a way to get the county to say, you shall do this.
Yeah,
And
but it's beyond what's required by state law. I mean, it's not just state law. Obviously, they're required to follow state law. So, okay, so it's above and beyond state law.
Yes.
Okay, I have another comment. The second paragraph that says San Juan County values transparency in government, is that part of the language that would be inserted in the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, because that, to me, I don't see that. That's kind of, again, kind of editorializing. It's a statement. It's not, it has no, it doesn't obligate, it doesn't add to the obligation. It's just kind of it's a finding. To me, it's a finding. It's not something that necessarily has to go into the charter. Thank you.
Okay, any others? I'm not seeing any. So I have one comment, which is this, I think this is valuable, and I fully appreciate why it's, somebody used the word squishy. It's a should as opposed to a shall, for the reasons that Amy, I think, articulated really well. My issue is it necessary? And so I would put it in the same bag with Commissioner Grout's comment on the last subject, which is, maybe be willing to revisit this if we get to the end and we have too big of a pile. So that would be my only thought. But I do think it's important to state this too. So I'm a little torn on that. So sorry to counterpoint myself, but those of you that know me, that's not unfamiliar. So I don't see any other comments. And so with that, if we could stop the screen share, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay, here I go.
Thank you very much.
Wow, well done, Patty.
Patty, thank you for helping on this. Really appreciate it. So with that, we'll call the question. So all those in favor?
Could I make a request for a friendly amendment?
Were you the maker of the motion?
No.
No.
I was.
I'm sorry, Bob. Okay, yeah. Yeah, please go ahead, under discussion.
I would like to ask a friendly amendment that we remove the second sentence of the paragraph that begins with San Juan County values transparency in government. I don't think that's necessary. It's not something that really lays out the obligation of the county. It's a finding. It's not a legally binding thing in any way whatsoever.
Do the maker of the motion and the second of the motion agree to that friendly amendment?
No.
Before I would agree
No.
to that
No.
amendment, I'd like to hear what Maureen has to say about
I
that.
say
Did
no.
you say no?
I say no.
Then no, I would not accept that as a friendly amendment.
Nor would I.
Okay. All right. So at that point, the friendly amendment fails. So back to the original calling of the question. So if there's no more discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Liz was opposed, and then no, you were an aye. Okay, any abstain? Commissioner Lafferty, how did you vote?
Yes.
You were a vote. Okay. So
Excuse me, Tony has his Tony, hand yeah. raised. I don't know if that's a vote or not.
I'm sorry, Tony, and I didn't see that. Tony, are you voting, or was that, did you have a comment that I missed?
No, I'm voting. I'm voting I'm voting yes.
Okay. Okay. In the future, because for the first time in several meetings, I'm actually able to see the digital things. They were not on my screen for the last few meetings, which was difficult. If you're voting in favor and you don't want to voice it, do one of those thumbs up. That'll work, and then it doesn't get confused with a comment. So with that, the motion carries. Maureen and/or Paul, next recommendation.
The duo.
And if Patty can share the screen again, that would be wonderful.
Okay, yeah, let's get that up first. Okay, so the next one is an ombudsperson, now referred to as the public advocate. You have not heard this or seen this before. And Dick, I hope that you'll be patient with me, but I think I'm going to read it. And I hope you all read it with me. The Operations Committee recommends that an Office of Public Advocacy be established for the purpose of receiving, accepting, and responding to public inquiries. We also recommend that the Office of Public Advocacy be blended with the current Public Records Clerk, and that the new position be called Public Advocate. The Public Advocate is a community outreach position accountable for the organizing and implementing responses to citizens' questions on how to navigate the county systems and to give access and opportunity for citizens, including employees, to raise concerns and voice complaints. The public advocate will receive, respond, and make recommendations to the council and/or appropriate county departments on ideas or complaints concerning the operations of county government. There you have it.
Thank you very much, Paul.
And we do recommend, I didn't say that, we recommend to the full CRC. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. And thank you for the work on this. Any comments or questions on this? Do you want to
Got
stop screen share, Patty, for a moment. I see Dave Anderson and then Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That looks perfect. That looks like a really solid recommendation and amendment to the charter, and I can't give it enough applause. Thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
I think that's the first one that's been perfect. Bob, please.
I think it's an excellent amendment, and for purposes of any further discussion, I would make the motion to accept this amendment.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second it.
A bunch of seconded. I'm going to give it to Jane. Jane gets the
Thank
second.
Thank you.
Jane, you had your hand up. Is that, did you have?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just curious in terms of I support it as well, very much so. A couple questions. One, I was wondering if you had the opportunity to see if other charter counties have this kind of arrangement. So I'm just curious about that.
Point of order. Aren't we mid-vote?
Yeah, we're under discussion. We have a motion and a second. And
Okay, my
under discussion.
apology.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind if I just ask a couple of things.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
And then Tom has a question after you.
Because it might address some other, just a couple things. So yeah, were you able to, see if other county charters have this role? Maureen, I raised this with you when we chatted the other day, like putting it in the office of the county clerk, is that manageable, right? And is that, if it's also open to employees as well, is that an appropriate place for it? So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. I think those are the only two questions I'd like to ask.
Okay.
Maureen, I can take the first question.
Oh, Paul or Maureen? Yeah, please, Paul.
Okay, so the first question is referred to, did we go to some other counties and see if they had some similars? And if you recall, on April 21st, that's when we had the executive from Snohomish County with us. So I did. I went to their charter and found where they had the public advocacy section, and we had a copy of that, and that was our first guide to develop what you have before you today.
Thank you. And Maureen?
And this is not going to the county clerk. This is going to the public records clerk. That's a very different thing. The county clerk is the elected office who's the administrator over there. The public records clerk is the person who receives all the requests for public records. And we didn't want to make a new position and have another salary. We thought this was a good blend. And the reason we chose this avenue is because we wanted to make it more positive than a negative one, because an ombudsman person is an investigative reporter and they are looking for problems. This person is trying to solve problems. So we thought it was a good blend.
Excellent. Tom, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're just a small county. In fact, we're perhaps probably the smallest. And there's such a list of things that would be great that we just can't afford, and I think that are overkill. So I'm going to vote negative on it. I just can't see it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Starr. Janet?
Maureen, I just want to go back to something you just said. It sounds like this is an existing position that you're changing the job description to, so it's not an additional staff person, it's just changing. So someone has this job now. Do you think they're going to care that their job description might change kind of hugely in a way?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that
absolutely,
that the person who currently has a job will be impacted by this in a way that they may not want. But I just want to make sure that we're not adding a person, we're just changing the job description of someone who has a job now. Got it. Okay.
Dick?
Just a question for those of you on the committee. Does any of you have any idea, and I don't, of how busy the public records person is now responding to requests? My experience in my former employment was we were constantly overwhelmed, and that person was. So I'm just wondering, do you have any sense of, is it realistic to attach this duty to that person?
Maureen and then Patty.
Patty, would you let Patty go first?
We were sort of looking forward to the fact that hopefully more public records would be online and not have to go through this person, and so that her her workload would be less. This position also we thought of as helping to get around in the county's system and to help people find public records on their own eventually, to be there to introduce the public to the county and its workings, and also be there to get complaints if there are such. Hopefully there won't be so many complaints, but the county needs somebody to help them out. The public to come out. And I'm hoping that the public records side of that position will be reduced by getting more online.
I have Sharon, and then I'd like to ask Amy if she wants to respond to Dick's original point too.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'll keep my hand raised for now. Yeah, so just was wondering if the communication skills of the ombudsman is an important consideration, because that might not be an important consideration for a public records person, but might be more of a consideration for a person who's responding, dealing with the public around complaints and the county around complaints.
Maureen, do you want to respond to that?
May I? Yes. This is not an ombudsman person anymore. This is a public advocate. So we're trying to get away from that kind of aggressive investigation type of thing. And I think that the current public records person is viewed often in a negative way because the job is to just keep pulling out all of that stuff. So I agree with Patty. Our attempt was, this is like a package, if you will. The county has to get records online and they have to have somebody help them navigate. They just upgraded their website and still people can't find simple things. It's hard to find us. It's hard to find the charter for some people. The public advocate would be the answer to all of that.
Okay, and I want to ask Amy if she had anything to add in response to Dick's question from a moment ago, and then I want to go to Tony and then David.
Sure, thank you. Yes, in answer to Dick's question, I will say that the current public records clerk is completely overwhelmed and constantly behind. So I do have concerns that additional duties might break her. I see that down the road, perhaps it's less as more records are online, but certainly that's not the case now. And I would also just like to add that currently, if anyone makes a public records request for any record that is online or available from different sources, the courts, the auditor's office, those things, the public records clerk does immediately provide that information with links and directions. And so that happens now. People aren't just left to drift about finding records that are available online where they can help themselves. She has those duties in hand now.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I have Tony and then David, and then I'd like to call myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the question to the committee. What if there's a position there now and the records are online, other than being the person in between the public and any complaints and for records and so on, what complaints are not being heard in the county that we know of right now? In other words, if I have a problem with the building department, do I go through this particular position, or why would I not call the building department directly, or the council member from Orcas Island that I'm having a problem with the building department? Is there a need for a position in the middle of that? I'm just not clear on why would we need something else. As Janet said earlier, is there somebody there right now that does this? So if their load of work is going to be reduced, what is there to add?
Okay. All right. I'm going to go to David, and then I'll circle, and then Jane, and then me, and then Jane, and then yeah, Tony. I'm just going to get the other comments and then let the committee respond to you, if that's okay.
Got it. Thank you. Because that was a question. So
yeah, of course. So, David, you're muted, David.
I'm generally in favor of this, but I'm concerned about the county public records clerk having the capacity to handle this. And I I think where it's going to end up is that that person will not be able to do what's expected of them. And then it'll be a question of that person requesting a budget item so that they can hire an assistant or whatever the person is called. So I'm just really concerned that the implementation of this is going to be very, very difficult. The term "be blended" with the current public records clerk, I'm not sure blended is not a term I've heard used with regard to government. I would think maybe it should be, and maybe this is a friendly amendment, should read be added to the job responsibilities of the current records clerk or something like that. Blended, I don't know what it means. So that I could make that as a friendly amendment request or whatever you suggest, Kevin, if people think that's a worthy idea. But
this is,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is why I elected to go to you and then myself, because I think there's a similar line of questioning here that maybe the Paul and Maureen can respond to. So I want to call myself and then Jane, and then turn it over to Paul and Maureen to respond to these different issues. The issue that comes up for me is that we are creating, we can't personalize this, and we also shouldn't think of this as an individual. I think what the committee is actually recommending, which we heard is perfect, is really a very important function for the county to service, for the county to provide, which is having a go-to person on whatever the issue is. If you have, you feel you weren't treated appropriately, or you just don't know who to call on a certain issue, this is the person. And they're on the website and it says, "I'm your advocate." I love that the committee has put it forward as in a positive light too, in that way. But for me, the last round of questioning raises the first question I had in my mind, which is, we're not creating we're not thinking of this as an individual. We're creating a service that shall be provided, and it will be up to the county manager and ultimately the county council to decide how to meet that service.
That's good.
And so the way I've seen this is, it may in fact be a second person. I know that we'd love to say it's the same person, but this person's already overwhelmed. We know that and recognize that. This new function that we're talking about is really important. And so the Charter Review Commission doesn't need to get into the weeds on whether or not it's 1 or 2 or 5 people, whatever. What we need to say is, if this is an important function, we're gonna mandate that it take place through the charter if it gets passed by the voters. And then the county manager will likely make a recommendation to ultimately the county council will decide on how to staff it, is the way I'm thinking about it. But I don't think we should get caught up in the individual.
Yeah.
So I have Jane, and then I'm going to go to Paul and Maureen to respond to this line of questioning. And Tony, if your specific question doesn't get addressed, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From a justice and equity perspective, I think that, and I agree very much with what Kevin just said in terms of this would be something that the county council with the county government would need to work out how to arrange. But from a justice and equity perspective, I think this is an extremely important and valuable role. I think there's far less understanding in this county among residents as to the structure of our government and what the government is meant to be, what its services are that it provides. And this might come as a shock to some of you, but there are citizens in the county, residents in the county, who think that the government consists of only the courts and the sheriff. And so I think there's a real need for sort of a one-stop shop to enable residents to call up the county and just get directed, get some, if they need documents, if they need to know where to go to ask questions or what have you. I think this is absolutely appropriate. And local governments are meant to be transparent and accountable to the citizens that they serve. And I think this reinforces that point. So I agree with Kevin, though, getting into the details of how the mechanics of it, no, not a good idea. And I also agree with Tom that I think we want to avoid looking at hiring another person for this and seeing how perhaps in a transitional way, this role could be built into the existing structure, and perhaps the role is shared between 2 staff persons or something like that.
Yeah. Great. So I'd like to turn it over to Paul and Maureen just to respond to these comments or clarify some questions that came up. And then I'd like to try and move us forward and see if we can call the question, because we still have a large agenda item with regard to election versus appointed that we need to get to, and we're halfway through our meeting time.
Okay.
So
Paul, would you like to go ahead?
Well, I'm proposing an amendment to this because we actually have two things here. We actually have the public advocate language, what it's all about. And the second part of that is who's going to do it. And that's a second sentence, excuse me. And it seems to me we could eliminate that second sentence that talks about, we recommend the Office of Public Advocacy be blended with the current public records clerk. We can remove that. And then we could go on to say the new position will be called public advocate. So that's just a recommendation. We don't want to take away from the meat of this piece of proposal simply because we're getting hung up on who's going to do it.
Would you like to make that as a friendly amendment to the makers of the motion?
With your permission, Maureen?
I'm not in agreement.
Oh, okay. Well, I think from what I've been hearing, it seems to me that would be the way that we could actually have the advocate in the meat of it there without having indicating who's going to do it. So I'd make that a second amendment if I could.
Okay, so you are proposing that as a friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment.
So did the maker of the motion and the second agree with that? David, Bob, you're muted.
As I understand from Maureen, she is in opposition to that friendly amendment. That being the case, I would not accept the friendly amendment.
Okay.
I do have an observation, which is that unlike all these other amendments, they are all written down. This amendment has not yet been composed. What we have is a paragraph telling us what will be in the amendment. So, we have to have faith that the amendment is going to, when it's written, is going to look like what the paragraph is recommending, unlike the other ones.
That's yes, that is
right
now.
Okay.
So I'm not seeing any other hands at this point. Can folks remind me who was the maker of the motion in the second?
I made the motion.
And who was the second? Kyle was. Jane was.
Jane.
Okay. So Kyle, you have a comment?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to agree with Paul's position. I support the concept. I'm not sure I support the direction of how it happens at this point.
Okay. Any other comments? Tony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do support the concept of having somebody who is the go-between or the go-to person, but I'm not sure if this is really an amendment to a constitution, as Mr. Sims referred to the charter. Is it so? Because if you put it in the constitution, what are the consequences if this doesn't happen? What happens? Who is in charge of this position, and how would that work? I think we can probably write a recommendation to the council to implement such a requirement or a job description of whomever they choose, as since they are the elected officials representing the county inhabitants. So I would recommend that we don't vote this as an amendment into the constitution, but just put some kind of a verbiage of a strong recommendation that this is a necessary item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just for the public's sake, when he's referring to constitution, several people have referred to the county charter as a constitution. I'm going to go to Dick and then Maureen, and then I have a comment.
I call for the question.
Okay, question's been called. So with that, any opposition? Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I see. I'm going to call them off just to make sure here. I've got David, Kevin, Paul, Maureen, Patty, Olivia, Sharon, Dave, Bob, Jane, and myself. I can't remember if I called on myself or not. Did I miss anybody who was in favor? Okay, all those opposed? I have Dick and Kyle and Tom and Tony and Liz. So and any abstentions? Janet is an abstention. Okay, so the motion carries. I will say that I think that Tony and Kyle made some really good points at the end. And so as we finalize language and such, we may want to think about how this is framed. I do not agree with Commissioner Gazelle that this shouldn't be in there for the reasons that Jamie and others raised. I think, and the subcommittee's recommendation, I think it's really important to have this position in our Constitution so that it is there forever, so that we have it. But that us clarifying where that position is within the county is difficult. So I think that could be something that could be discussed later on. Janet.
And that's precisely why I abstained. I think the position is essential, but I think putting in the amendment that should go to a specific person right now, I think it needs to be clarified.
Yeah, I actually appreciated Paul's friendly amendment. So Liz, please. You're muted. Liz.
I could have abstained, but I voted no for that very same reason, Janet.
Yeah. So there's enough for us raising the question that, maybe we think about this and we try and think about language in the future, but the intent of the commission is very clear that we want this position. And right now the motion is that it be housed in the existing clerk's position, clerk of public records position. But let's move forward. Other recommendations from the subcommittee?
Yes, we have one more. And would you mind taking the lead on that, Maureen?
Yes. I think this one may well end up in conjunction with the work of the Justice and Equity Committee. And so we may not need to take this much forward. We did recommend it. And what it is language reinforcing anti-discrimination, bullying, et cetera, and harassment as it applies to boards, commissions, and committees. This was recommended by James Wolfe, the HR manager. We turned it into a statement. It has been reviewed with Amy Vera, and we think it is high time that language be applied to volunteer boards and committees so that they can, and how it's delivered, I don't know. That's up to the county to decide. But we think it's time for the boards and commissions to have the same requirements to meet.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Can you stop sharing the screen for a moment, Patty?
You bet.
Thank you. Question. Okay, go ahead, Liz.
So I wanted advice from, I guess, you, Kevin, on this dichotomy of trying to decide, but before we hear from Justice and Equity. So it just feels like an awkward place to try and make a decision without the information from such Justice and Equity.
Thank you. That's, I believe, exactly why Maureen prefaced her comments with about that. And so what I was actually going to recommend, and not just for a timing issue, every one of these things is really important for us to discuss. So we need to take the time to do them. But because we have an official with us today regarding a separate agenda item, and we have a large agenda item coming up, and more importantly, I would like to have kind of a joint discussion of that recommendation within the Justice and Equity. What I would like to recommend is that maybe we punt that recommendation and bring it up next Thursday during our conversation with Justice and Equity. And it may be that the recommendation stays exactly the same, but I'd just like to hear that in the context of that larger discussion. Would folks be okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, and Sharon, I see your hand up. Was that a question or a comment you had?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in case people don't know, that we've been working very hard on justice and equity, and we really hoped to present today, but we need a little more time. So appreciate everybody's patience with us.
Oh. Of course, I have Jane and then Dave. No? Okay, no Jane. Awesome. Love that. We love hearing your voice, but love not hearing it too. Dave, please.
Kevin, I just want to remind the Commissioner Ranker, I just want to remind the Commission that we did pass a resolution dealing with 2.60 about inclusionary language. So I hope that's looked at by the Justice and Equity Committee as well.
Yes, And one of the things that, and I'll get to this under new business if we can, but one of the things that our new staff person will be doing is exactly that, which is kind of mending all of this and then going to subcommittee chairs and at times the full commission and saying, hey, you've got some things here that need to be put together in the right way. What do you think? So Jane, please.
Yeah, sorry. I know you all wanted to hear my voice. I just had to say something. No, I'm just kidding. No, I just wanted Dave. Dave, I appreciate your comment, and I just wanted you to clarify what you just clarify what you meant there, because I might be able to just speak to me about what you were just the comment you were just making.
But he could send you a note to clarify that, right?
Okay. Well, yeah, sure, absolutely, and just that. The resolution, if you're talking about resolution 31, 2020, that is a very foundational resolution to all the Justice and Equity Committee work. So wasn't sure if that's what you're talking about. Okay, thanks, Dave. Sorry.
He can clarify that for you. Okay, so is that it for the Operations Committee at this point in time?
Well, we have a couple of others, but they're not recommendation to CRC. But do you want us to continue?
Oh, yes, please. I want you to finish your presentation. And
So
there was a question in the chat. I do not think we need a motion for that. That was by consensus that we're going to defer the discussion of the last recommendation.
Okay.
Yes.
And please let me know if there's an objection or are there any objections to allowing that by consensus. Okay. Final pieces here, please, Paul.
So the next one is evaluate and potentially expand employee evaluations for satisfaction process for the county manager. And this is, we have no recommendation for CRC. The members felt no need to pursue any additional changes. It is believed another committee is handling the evaluation of county manager tasks. That's
Okay.
where we left it.
Thank you.
Should we move on?
Yes, please.
The next one is evaluate department/employee satisfaction with current chain of command protections from executive pressures. After discussion with James Wolf, Personnel Director, it was understood that there are sufficient policies and rules in the personnel manual to cover this issue. So the committee felt there was no need to pursue any additional changes.
Excellent. Thank you.
And the last one, on July 21st, when I made this, the last thing you saw on your screen was a comparison of salaries between the elected officials and department heads. You probably remember that page. We had elected officials earning $97,000, where we had equivalent department heads earning as much as $130,000. We presented that to you. We were hoping to have a resolution come from the CRC supporting the fact that there would be more equity and more parity between those two, between elected and appointed. 2 days later, and I don't know how this happened, but it did. The Salary Commission voted to increase the salaries from $97,000 to $113,800 for the elected officials. And that was for the 4 departments: assessor, treasurer, auditor, and clerk. So we do not want to carry any further proposals to the CRC on this. And well, we're just happy that they received a salary and it's becoming better in salaries.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So there's no language being recommended for the charter on any of these. This was just to present that you would discuss these and found no need for recommendation.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the subcommittee for incredible work. This is a lot of it is nuts and bolts and gets really tedious. And I think you guys have done just an excellent job. I also want to say on the record that I have heard from several of you, and I fully agree, that James Wolf has just been really helpful and is obviously doing an incredible job for the county and the role that he plays. And so I thought it was important to acknowledge the just incredible job he's doing, and hopefully he'll hear that and recognize that we really appreciate his support of us and his answers to our questions, but also most importantly, the job he does for the county employees. So I saw a hand. Did somebody have a hand up? No? Okay, great. So I believe that concludes the committee report. Sorry, Maureen, please.
Just one real quick one. I would like to ask the permission to go ahead and write an amendment on the public advocate. Just capsulize that and make it an amendment and submit it. Because you said it wasn't an amendment form.
Yeah, that would be fine. And I do think that further discussion on that might be helpful. There's a motion now to do it as is. And so
Oh,
that,
there is?
the motion was to move forward that subject, and we still have to define the specific language. So that will have to come back. The way I'm anticipating this for everyone's sake, and we've discussed this a little bit, is that right now we're going through and making our decisions. Some of them, subcommittees have had the time to really present exact word form that will probably be, in the charter. Others, like this last one in question, has been a summarization, and we've made a decision and given direction, but the specific language is still necessary. So there will have to be a vote or votes at the end of our process to clarify kind of, this is our final report and recommendations or amendments that we're proposing to the public. And that's when we'll finalize some of those. And if anybody has any questions on that, I'm happy to discuss it, but that's kind of the way we've been thinking.
Okay.
I would also defer to some of you who were on the Charter Review Commission last time or the time before on how that works as well. Not now, but let me know if there's other ideas that we need to be thinking about, please. So with that, I'd like to move on to the committee report from elections and appointed, election versus appointed. We're going to revisit now. If folks will remember, there were a number of you that requested that we revisit the recommendation of election versus appointment for the position of the county sheriff. And the subcommittee report originally was that it stay as is, it stay as an elected official. And so what I'd like to do for this, and last night there was a vote to do the same, a revisiting of the discussion with the county manager, and I'd like to propose the same process, which is spend just a couple minutes with the subcommittee, reminding us of why they came or how they came to their conclusion and some of the research and background they did, and then open it up for a discussion. I know that several of you wanted to comment on this. So if folks are okay, that's the process I'd like to propose. Okay, so with that, I know Maureen, others on the election versus appointed committee. Do you just want to, and I'm sorry I didn't prep you for this, Maureen, but can you spend a couple minutes just talking about the process that you went through and the discussions that you had, and really just a summary, because we all heard it, but just to refresh us.
Well, our committee, our very good committee, spent a lot of time on this, as we did on all of these questions about should elected or appointed happen. And we found ourselves constantly proposing the reasons why that could be countered for the reasons to do it the opposite. So each point has a counterpoint, and that became more clear as we went on. Bob O'Connell did a wonderful layout of why we should keep the sheriff elected, and David wrote the counterpoint to that. And so we can say there's no oversight, but we can say that there is the public watches the department. There's something that be said on each side. So having said that, I'd rather turn it over to this committee and let them show you what they've done.
Okay, are there other members of the appointed versus elected that would like to make a comment now? And if not, I'd like to turn it over to Sheriff Krebs and let him spend a few minutes speaking to us, and then open it up for deliberations with the full commission. Bob, would you like to make a comment?
I would just state that I was kind of assigned, or maybe volunteered, to come up with, and I think most of us were right close as to one side or the other, but to come up with the reasons why the sheriff should be appointed. And then David Dellendorf took up the task of looking at each one of those to explain why the sheriff ought to be elected. And we have those now. I have got both sets of those in front of me, and they're relatively brief. There's 5 reasons, I think, for each. We could either give you those now, or give you those never, or give you those after we've heard from the sheriff, whichever you choose.
I think it's very important that I think it would be valuable for us to see those. I don't have a preference if we see them now versus after the sheriff, but I do think it's important we see them. And I think we also need to recognize that this is a really important decision that we're making. And so I think it's important to take the time. I do want to allow the sheriff to speak, though. David, I see your hand. Let's go. Why don't we do this? Why don't we go to David, let Bob just show the screen, share the screen. If you can do that, Bob, are you going to be able to share your screen? Or you want to
No.
read?
I can read these, or if someone else has them, they can share the screen, but I'm afraid I don't have the.
I can do that, Bob.
Okay, so why don't we let David go? Then we're going to share the screen quickly, and then I want to turn it over to the sheriff to make sure he has adequate time to address us. Please, David. You're muted, David.
I'm sure this will come as a surprise to everybody, but I disagree with all three of you. Let's not put words in the mouth of the people who want to have this position be appointed. Let's let them speak. Let's let them speak and tell us, and then we respond. That's what we've already presented our case, and now we're waiting for people to respond. So with their questions and rationale for appointing rather than electing. So I think we don't do what has been suggested with Bob's and my presentation. That's our internal document that we were prepared to respond to people who have specific observations and rationales.
I think that's an excellent point, actually. So thank you for raising it. I'm going to go to Jane, and then I'm going to let the sheriff speak to us. Jane, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I humbly disagree in the sense that, you know, the findings of the subcommittees or committees are findings that we should have the ability to hear and understand at a level of detail that may be necessary, given that the issue has come up for discussion again. And so, you know, the job of the subcommittees is to do research and deliberation. And if we didn't get that level of detail in the presentation that took place last week, then I don't think it's appropriate at all that we not be given you know, information that portrays both sides, because frankly, I don't feel I have enough information to work on, and I would appreciate the committee telling us what they looked into.
Okay, so my recommendation is that we allow the sheriff to speak first, and then we come back to having Maureen share the screen and go through those. My understanding is kind of a pro and con. It's kind of looking at both sides of the issue. I think that would be really valuable. David, I really appreciate the point you're making, that we need to get into the deliberations. But I also really appreciate what Jane is saying, that, you know, let's have an educated deliberation. So with that, if commissioners are okay, I would like to ask the sheriff to address us. And then when he is concluded, I will ask Maureen to share her screen and go through those.
I don't know that I can, but I'll try.
Well, we can read them too. I think that would be fine. I think it will help us launch into our deliberation.
Okay, that's fine.
So, just to point out, the sheriff has had some technical difficulties. He really wanted to be there for us visually, but has been unable to. So, Sheriff Krebs, we just appreciate you taking the time today and being willing to address us again. So thank you for being here.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Well, I don't have a whole lot that I haven't already said, and I haven't listened to all of your meetings, so I don't know exactly what was discussed with all you. The one thing I would point out is, you know, we kind of have a saying in the islands, it's the islands way of life. You know, I hear all the time that people think this is Mayberry. And we work really, really hard to make people think this is Mayberry. We have a low crime rate. We have a good relationship with the community. And I think that's what makes us the islands. If you look around at some of the other problems that we see in law enforcement nationwide or even statewide, I think a lot of it can be boiled down to, in my opinion, two issues. One, there's community expectation. And then there's a relationship with the community. Kevin and Paul and Kyle can tell you that as an elected official, your relationship with the community is completely different than anything else. You know, there really is no day off. You're never off the job. You're never off duty. And the relationship that I have with this community, I feel is incredibly strong, as with my guys in the community. And it's that relationship that allows us to be the place that we all love, and the place that a lot of us have retired and moved to later in life. And we have that expectation that it's going to stay this way, that law enforcement's going to provide a level of service, and we have that expectation. And I think we meet, and we always try to exceed that expectation. And as far as going in the direction of an appointed law enforcement head, you don't have that. The appointed person will never have that relationship. It took me a good 5 years on the job here just to feel comfortable and have a good relationship with the community. And then I've spent the next 10 years building upon that relationship. Your average chief of police is only in the position, typically in his position nationwide, the average between 3 and 4 years. I think San Juan County, I can certainly see how this county would either be a stepping stone or it would be a retirement position for someone. And as I've said, when I hire people, and I get a lot of lateral applicants from other agencies who have retired from their agency, and I let them know that, this is a nice community. It's a destination place. People spend thousands of dollars to come here to vacation in our beautiful community. And if you think you're going to come here and be retired, then you probably want to look somewhere else, because the moment we kind of take that attitude, then our relationship with community suffers. And I don't want to see that. I know none of you want to see that. I certainly don't want to go the way of King County or Pierce County or even the city of Seattle. Your chief of police, for whatever reason, is a very political position. Sheriff is an elected position, but I don't fall into the politics that I see a lot of the chiefs of police around the state fall into. I mean, just look at Seattle, look at the chief of police in Seattle and all the politics that she went through, and she was an appointed. And Seattle, I think, has gone through, God, since I've been sheriff, I think they've gone through 4 chiefs. And granted, Seattle has a lot of problems. King County has a lot of problems. That's why they went to the appointed sheriff, because the rank and file had no confidence in their sheriff. They just held a vote of no confidence, and it was overwhelmingly yes, that they have no confidence in their sheriff. We don't see that here. And like I said, it's the relationship that we have with our communities. It's the relationship I have with the communities. And I think that's a huge thing to consider when you're considering taking your head elected law enforcement person away from the community and putting it under either 1 elected county manager or 3 elected county commissioners. Even in this county, in the last decade, we've had 4 different county commissioners. That's a lot of change. And when the sheriff is not answerable to the community, you can fall into that political realm, so to speak. So, with that, I'm more than happy and would love to answer any questions you have or any concerns. And I'll leave it at that. I appreciate you letting me talk.
Yeah, Sheriff, thank you very much for your comments, and thank you also for your service. I see Olivia and Jane both have their hands up. I want to ask you both, and then Paul, we were going to have the subcommittee just go through quickly their bullet points that they discovered on pro and con. Do you want to speak before we do that?
Oh, I was just making sure that happens. So thank you.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Okay. Jane?
I did have a question for Sheriff Krebs, but if it's better that I hold that question until we hear the pros and cons.
Would you mind holding, and then because I think there will probably be a number of questions for the sheriff, but if we could just.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay? And Paul, is that okay if we do that?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. Maureen, do you want to run through those quickly, just a summarization?
Sure. I mean, I think in support of elected, I think the most, what we came up with was the sheriff is the most visible elected official, and the sheriff is accountable to the voters. As an elected official, the sheriff can concentrate more on efforts regarding law enforcement priorities. Election also removes the position from council and administrative intrusion. And those are the first things that came up. The cons are very different. I'm going to let Bob or David give the cons, because you gave the rebuttal to this. So why don't you go ahead with that?
Bob or David, please.
Yes, please.
Bob,
Muted.
you're muted, Bob, which will probably not help you make your case.
First of all, yeah, I wrote 5 reasons why this position ought to be appointed. And then I think David countered with 5 why this position should stay elected. I would like to super emphasize that this has nothing to do with the present sheriff. This has to do with the sheriff 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, when our charter will still be in force. Okay, so this is it has to do with how things could come down. Okay, there are 5 of these. First is, don't we want to hire the most qualified person we can get? Isn't it better to hire from a pool of hundreds or thousands of very highly qualified persons from throughout the region or even the country? Surely members of this highly qualified group are unlikely to be willing to move here without the promise of an appointed job to run for office. That's the first one. The second one is,
excuse me, Bob, should I give you my counterpoint one by one, or do you want me to wait till the very end?
Whichever you like.
Why don't we stop, please? Sorry. Let's let Bob do his points, and then I thought Maureen just did pros. If there's additional pros, David, I will call on you after Jane.
All right, the second one then is, an elected sheriff is in for 4 years, subject only to a difficult recall by public vote. This means that we might have to put up with conduct in office that we find intolerable. An appointed sheriff conducting the office in such a way could be fired immediately. Third, an elected sheriff can construct her or his own insulated kingdom. Neither the city manager nor our county council could tell this person what to do. Any citizen input from an advisory council or a citizens oversight committee could be completely ignored, at least until the next election. Fourth, experience tells us that the odds are that the next sheriff is working for the present sheriff as a deputy. Do we want our practical list of candidates to be that small and politically homogeneous? 5, although it is true that an elected sheriff is likely to know a good percentage of the people of this county, there is a downside to this. Familiarity, together with human nature, can lead to favoritism, a factor an elected sheriff may have to deal with when disputes arise. That same familiarity could lead to an uncomfortable pressure to turn a blind eye, etc. Obviously, there may be other good arguments in favor of the appointment, but the committee is likely to have to counter at least these. So that's them.
Thank you very much, Bob. Jane,
Sure.
I go to you next. I actually, David, if you have other points from the subcommittee that haven't been raised by Maureen or Bob, I thought Maureen was giving the pro and Bob was giving the con on your list. If there's additional ones that haven't been touched upon, go ahead and touch upon those. But I also really want to get to deliberations and Q&A with the sheriff too. But David, so I didn't want to cut you off. If there's another list that we haven't heard from the subcommittee, I wanted to let you do that before we get into Jane's question of the sheriff. And then I also have Paul on the list.
As Maureen stated earlier, she asked me to come up with the responses to each of Bob's 5 points, which I have done, and I have them in front of me, not for sharing other than for me to read them. But that was what I was asked to do. And if you want me to share that, that's fine. Or we could wait and I could, you could ask for comments from Jane and others. And if they coincide with what I have written, I can then read those. So whatever you want to do.
David, if that's okay, why don't we move forward? And then if there's issues that come up that that you can address based on your findings, raise your hand and I'll call upon you. Is that okay?
Yeah, but they are the same issues as Bob has already read.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So I'd like to go to Jane, and I believe, Jane, you have a question for the sheriff, but maybe some comments as well. So I have Jane and then Paul. And then
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions for the sheriff, the questions are, one is based on some of the work that Justice and Equity Committee has been doing in the past few months since we first heard the presentation that the sheriff made to us. I think it was back in March. And while it may seem that everything is going very, very well in San Juan County with respect to the relationship between the sheriff's office and the community, we've received numerous testimonials that in fact, people don't feel that relationship is good. And it's been pretty, that may not be the majority, but there are certainly people who don't feel that way. And unfortunately, those kinds of people don't feel free to talk to the sheriff about that. And there's a lot of fear. And so I think it's not wise to say that everything is going fine with the majority white population in this county and not pay attention to the fact that we're not purely white. We are a diverse county at some level. And I would say it's those people who represent a diversity are the people that don't feel adequately served by the sheriff's office. So that's information our committee has obtained. And I think that's important that the sheriff hear that information. And I think that there was a recommendation in one of the town halls that our sheriff's office do more to help build community, and a community that is diverse, and help build inclusion of all peoples. So I just want to offer that. The other thing I'm curious about is that given the nonpartisan nature of county council members, I'm interested in knowing what Sheriff Krebs thinks would be the political problems the sheriff would experience if the sheriff is appointed and working within the county government administration. So I think that the political issues, I think, could probably be far and wide much more significant in big, huge counties like Pierce, like King, and the city of Saddle. But I'm curious to know what Sheriff Krebs feels would be the political nature of being in the appointed position and how that would constrain his ability to do his job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. Sheriff Krebs, do you have any response to that? And I also want to preface your comments by saying I recognize it's very difficult to respond to individual situations that you're not privy to the specifics of. But there was the second point also had a question too. But in general, do you have any thoughts or comments that you'd like to make in response to that?
Yeah, so the first one with working with our minority communities, that's something that is a priority of ours. I work with Eleanor Hogue from Orcas Island, who is an advocate for the minority communities. She's got my cell number, I've got her phone number. In fact, we just had an individual who ICE came up and picked up on San Juan Island and took them away. I found out about it a couple hours after they were gone. I contacted Ellie because I knew Ellie would hear about it at some point, and I want to work with her to make sure that the community understands that it's not us doing that. We had nothing to do with it. I had no idea they were coming. And building those relationships is very difficult in those communities. We work hard at that. Certainly having a Spanish speaking employee would be of great benefit to us. We go to recruitment fairs, job fairs, and we try to recruit people that would benefit in those areas, female, minority deputies. So, it's tough. It's tough getting people to apply and come up here just because of the cost of living and the fact that we're surrounded by a moat of water. But it's a challenge that we'll continue to work on, and building those relationships within the minority and Hispanic communities is something that we'll continue to work on as well. I appreciate hearing that, and it is very difficult to work on a problem when the problem doesn't come to you. You hear about it through other people, and then I don't hear about it until a meeting such as this. So, that's an area of focus that we'll certainly put more emphasis in, focusing on working on building those relationships in that community. The second question, as far as the politics goes, it's not necessarily partisan politics. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about, Republican, Democrat, whatever. I'm talking about the politics of, everybody has a different agenda. All the different council members, they each have a different agenda. They have their agenda for their constituents. And not all agendas, you can't make everybody happy all the time, so to speak. And if this position is being pulled in different directions because of an agenda, and I'm not saying it would happen here, I'm not saying that it is happening here, I'm not even saying that the people on the commission or the council, excuse me, I keep calling it commission as well, the council, I'm not saying the people that our current council members would do this, but it happens. You read about it in the paper all the time. You see it nationwide, where the chief of police is at will to the council or a county executive, county manager. And that's where the politics come into play. So.
Thank you, Sheriff Krebs.
Yeah, and I appreciate your input on the minority groups and the minority communities. And I'm always looking for ways to better build those relationships. And, if that's something you could help facilitate, I would be more than happy and welcome sitting down to do that. Because like I said, I work with Ellie Hogue. I work with, a couple people on San Juan Island who I know have good relationships in that community. And we are constantly trying to build those relationships. So, because it is important. Those people oftentimes don't have a voice out of that fear. And that's not what we want. Nobody should have to live with crime, abuse, intimidation, whatever.
Thank you. I'm going to go Paul, Tony, Liz.
Well, Sheriff Krebs, I was really, really glad what you talked about in terms of your rapport with the community. I have been with the county assessor's office for 28 years, 8 years as an appraiser and 20 years as assessor. And I can tell you, I've been over approximately 2/3 of all the parcels in the county and knocked on doors, and the rapport that I had with the people out there was, I can't even measure it. And if you folks have never had that kind of experience, it's hard to relate that to you, but it's there, it's an intangible. But the electorate is very much, and the constituents are very much aware of both high volume work that Sheriff Krebs does and the assessor. I think those two different departments are interrelating with our community all the time. And there's a lot of negative things about the assessor. We all hear that. And there's negative things about the sheriff. But how you do overall with the community, they totally respect what you're doing. The guy's going to pay taxes on what you assess them. They want to know who's going to assess them. If they're going to have some responsibilities of the sheriff's office, they'd like to know who the sheriff is. And of course, how you do your job and how you relate to that community is paramount. And I totally agree with Sheriff Krebs. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to just real quick, I appreciate that, Paul. Thank you. And Jane, I'm not for a second do I sit here and think that we're doing things perfectly or that we can't get better. We are constantly looking for ways to get better, to do things better, to better serve people. Because as long as there's one person out there not being properly served, then we're doing an injustice by not trying to serve that person either. And obviously, like I said, I'm not foolish or ignorant enough to sit up here and tell you that things are hunky-dory and they're perfect and they're great. That's not what I'm saying. But compared to the mainland, things are really good here. And if we can, if they're great for the white population of this county, and if we can make the minority population of this county make it just as good for them, then it's a win-win for everybody, and that's our goal.
Okay, I have Tony and then Liz. And before you go, in 2 minutes, I need to break for public comment. We are going to go over today. I know some of you have a hard stop at noon. And so what I will probably do is delay the executive action on this vote so that everybody can participate in that, because it's so very important of a vote if we do in fact go over. So I'm going to go Tony and then Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff Krebs. I have a point about the process that we're going through right now, Mr. Chair, and I also have a comment to make. The process is our subcommittee moved forward with keeping the sheriff as an elected position. Our chair, Commissioner C mentioned a few points that we stated for to support that. And then Commissioner O'Connell was asked to give the counterpoints to something that are his counterpoints, and I felt that we should have at least responded with the other points that supported the decision of the committee to move forward in response to Commissioner O'Connell's points. So that's my statement about process. My other statement about this whole thing with the sheriff being elected or not, I completely disagree with our committee. The opposite reason of our moving forward with keeping it elected is that I don't think we need to have a nationwide search for what, according to Commissioner O'Connell, the best and brightest. This is a small community. It's very important that our sheriff knows the community. It's very important that the sheriff remains independent. It's also, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's also very important that the sheriff is not entangled with the whoever is his or her boss is going to be, or they act as a puppet of the boss of the sheriff's department. I want the sheriffs to be the one responsible for the department, and I want that position not to be micromanaged by other elected officials. In this case, it could be the council. It also could be, if the executive becomes elected, that could be another position. So I want that to be an independent source, that the sheriff has authority to deal with their department, and of course listen to the public concerns, but not be a puppet of somebody else or managed by somebody else. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gazelle. I'll circle back on process in a moment. I want to go to Liz and then public comment.
I'm going to withdraw my question for now.
Okay, wonderful. So we will go to public comment. I'm going to suggest that we go 15 minutes and no more over. So we'll go to 12:15. We'll go to public comment just after these comments that I will make. And then I am going to suggest, because at least two of you have let me know that you have a hard stop at noon. And I do think it's important. This is a very important decision that we're making. And I don't know if we're going to have time for the deliberation and the vote. And so what I'm thinking at this point, unless there's major objections, is that we continue this to our next meeting, and we will put it on first on the agenda to continue the deliberations, which will bump us a little bit, but this is the crunch we're getting into. So unless there's objections, I'm going to say we go to 12:15 with the intention that the executive action take place at the next meeting. Randy, you've popped up. Is there a concern with that? No? Okay. With that, then we're going to go to public comment. So members of the public, if there are any members of the public that would like to speak, I don't see your name showing up, but you've got your hand raised and you've got a wonderful, looks like wood cabinets behind you. So could you please introduce yourself for the record and let us know where you're calling from today, please?
All right. My name is Robin Reed and I'm calling from Lopez Island. And I wanted to first congratulate you on your executive action yesterday on the OCE. And I'm going to make a comment that's very forward looking. And so I apologize, it isn't about operations, but it's forward looking for you to maybe think about. I've heard that in different committees, you're discussing a Bill of Rights, with the rights of nature, you're discussing social justice, and also obviously another committee did the OCE yesterday. And I wanted to think about how this might all fit together and why they're different and why they're complementary. So in my view, the Bill of Rights is a statement of value. And in that value, you're stating the value not only for rights of nature, but you're really stating the value, in my view, of three kinds of justice: social justice, environmental justice, and earth justice. So social justice, and I'm going to give you the definition just so that everybody's on the same page, is the just distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a human society. So that's social justice. Environmental justice is the fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens within a human society. And then earth justice is just treatment by humans of the millions of species on Earth and their supporting ecosystems. So these different levels, you're talking about all of them. And I think it could be put into the Bill of Rights as a statement of value of what you think, so that they're not sort of competing. And then the second piece is I could imagine you might be worried about piling all of this into one amendment. I was wondering if you could separate them, have the Bill of Rights in one amendment that voters vote on, and then the OC in another, so that, you know, one passes, one doesn't, and all those sorts of things. And then finally, I'll just say one more thing, and that is collaborate across many diverse perspectives. You've been great at that. Keep it up. And then also being bold and proactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments today. Mike, do you have a comment?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. And if you could please introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Mike Hairston, and just for the record, I do work for the sheriff's office. And I've been in law enforcement for over 32 years. I retired from North Dallas, and now I work for Sheriff Krebs. I live on Orcas Island, and I know a few of you, and I wanted to just give you a couple of comments on that. Mr. Gazelle was right on many factors. I've worked for chiefs who are appointed. This is my first sheriff to work for. And he was very correct that the sheriff or whoever your head law enforcement official needs to be beholden to the community. A chief of police, an appointed sheriff, is going to be beholden for our county, four people, 3 council members, and the elected or the county manager. That's something that really needs to be taken into consideration, because if you bring in someone from out of the area, they may be a heavy-handed law enforcement official, and we may become a revenue generating entity. So these are things to consider. Also, you know, Mr. O'Connell was talking about creating a kingdom. The deputies that work for San Juan County, the county and the citizens are number one in their mind. That's what we serve. That's who we care about. We work at the direction of the sheriff, but we are a county supporting agency. And as somebody had brought up, I'm looking at my notes, so excuse me.
It's all right. It's all right.
As somebody brought up that they think we're the only law enforcement or the only county officials. Well, that's because we do a lot of the services. You call 911 for everything in the county for the most part. These are things to consider in your consideration. Again, I appreciate the work of you, the committee. I've been listening for an hour. There's been a lot of good work that y'all have done. I'm just giving it to you from a perspective of 32 years plus working in 2 different types of agencies. And I'll be on here till the end. If anybody has a question, I'm happy to answer.
Mike, thank you very much for your comments today, and also for taking the time. Randy, I see you. I just want to see if there's any members of the public before I go to you, if that's okay. Are there any other members of the public who would like to comment today? Micheline, please.
Hello, everybody. I want to thank you again and congratulate you on your process yesterday. It was great to watch, and I appreciate the outcome. Thank you again for your hard work and all your sacrifice. I know how much you guys are sacrificing. All right, so today I was lucky enough to attend, early this morning, a half-day energy, salmon, agriculture, and community workshop. And the guest speaker was Congressman Michael Simpson. And the reason I'm looking at notes is I want to quote everybody right. It was just a remarkable thing about how you solve problems, how you come together and collaborate to find problems and it talked a lot about the environment, about people, and about climate. Obviously, this is about Congressman Simpson's Snake River proposal and plan. But I wanted to quote something that Shannon Wheeler, who is a Nez Perce tribe leader, said. He said, Salmon can adapt and change. Only we can adapt and change. And we do that through experience, science, and technology. And we come together, we speak the truth, and we have candid conversations. And he said those can hurt, but we have to have them. We have to collaborate and come together. And then the Congressman Simpson, he has an incredible, brave vision, creative vision to how to solve these problems. And he has brought people together. Anyway, he said, we don't have to endorse each other's concepts. What we have to do is endorse each other's solutions. He says to his critics, I know what you are against. Tell me what you are for. And collaboration was the word of the day. And I don't know, the conference gave me lots of hope. It will be uploaded online if anybody wants it. It was a 4-hour conference. So anyway, it was a unique look at how they are problem solving in the Tri-City areas. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Micheline. Randy, did you have something you wanted to share?
3
Please.
minutes, please, for public access. Randy Gaylord, County Prosecutor. I've worked with 3 sheriffs, Sheriff Bill Cumming, who was a 6-term sheriff, Sheriff Rob No, who is a 1-term sheriff, and now Sheriff Krebs, who's a 2-term sheriff. It's always been a pleasure to work with the elected sheriffs. And the reason I think more than ever why you should keep the elected sheriff is due to the discretion that elected sheriff exercises every day over his workforce and the priorities that workforce has in dealing with crime. There is more crime that happens in this county than any one sheriff department can investigate. And so decisions are made daily from the top and decisions from the top down as to what the priority is going to be with respect to that crime. And those are independent decisions. They are decisions that should not be made based upon what county council members think or the county manager. The person who is responsible for that should be elected. And then every 4 years, there's a very vigorous election process. And even with Bill Cumming, who came in year after year to win those elections, the challengers brought out points that were very important at directing the way that law enforcement is provided here in the islands. And in 2018, there was a great emphasis on what was happening with respect to drugs. And you've seen some very remarkable changes in that respect, both by our sheriff and the state legislature. So these elections are important at bringing out topics of interest, and most of all, making sure that somebody with discretion is the person who is elected. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, we're going to go back into deliberations. I said 15 minutes, so we've got 13 now. I had Liz who withdrew her question. I just want to circle back. Liz, did you want to comment now, or do you still want to wait?
Yes, please.
Okay, and then I have Bob and David and Jane.
Sheriff Krebs, I had a question for you, and I hear your passion, and it is not wasted on me at all for having this continuous elected position. My question to you is, can you imagine out loud for us the impacts? Because what I appear to be seeing is that these are issues of character and ability, character and skills. But I'm feeling like what you're saying is that there's a lot more constraints that I'm not aware of. So if you could imagine for me what it might have looked like had you been elected, so I can clearly understand the distinction between the two.
And just to clarify, you mean if he had been appointed?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that. I've never been appointed. I've only ever worked for the sheriff's office. And so in my law enforcement career, I've only ever worked for an elected official.
Well, maybe if I ask the question this way, what scares you about this changing to an appointed position?
Well, I think the thing that concerns me most is like I said, the political nature of it, the fact that the relationships are not built with the community. You don't see chiefs of police with the same relationships with their communities that you see with sheriffs. And as I said, you know, anybody who's been in an elected position can tell you that. I'm sure, you know, Paul could probably, you know, maybe imagine the differences between an appointed assessor versus an elected assessor. You know, the relationships with our community is very important. And when I see what's going on in the mainland, I read all the news articles, I watch all the news broadcasts on law enforcement, and it's something that, you know, for the last, well, probably the last 10 years, it's been really in the spotlight. And I sit and I think about this all the time, because the last thing I want is for us to go the way of the mainland, to have those problems and those issues. And that's why having that relationship with the community is very important to me. But I look at, you know, what's going on, and I see it as really, I know it's simplistic, and it's not this simplistic, but I see it as, you know, expectations and relationships. You know, people think that the police are out to get them, that they're heavy-handed, and maybe in a lot of cases they are heavy-handed. But, you know, problems start at the top and they end at the top. And that's where, you know, having that relationship with our community to know what's going on and what's important to our community is very important to me.
Liz, you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Yeah, and so maybe so when you talk relationship, what I hear is personal character and skills. So I'm trying to understand how appointed versus elected, if somebody comes in that's elected and they don't have the character and skills that you clearly possess?
No, I think what I'm talking about is it's nothing. It's really as simple as, you know, I get emails, I get phone calls, I get called on my personal phone. I get stopped at the grocery store, I get stopped in town getting coffee, I get stopped everywhere, and people will either, you know, tell me, hey, thank you for the job you guys are doing, I really appreciate what you're doing. And that just kind of reaffirms that what we're doing is we're doing something right. Or I get, hey, you know, I've got a problem out on my road. There's somebody's dumping. I just got a gal who told me somebody's dumping wood on her road, tree branches. You know, it's a private drive, but we're going to try to work through it and figure out, you know, what's happening. But it's those type of relationships that people, they probably wouldn't expect that they could call the sheriff and talk to, or stop the sheriff in town and say, hey, somebody's, dropping tree branches on my driveway, when we have people who don't call us. And after I find out you didn't call us, my question is, well, why didn't you call us on that? You should have called us. And like, well, we didn't want to bother you. No, don't think that way. It's not a bother. So it's building those kinds of relationships. And it's really a personal relationship, one person at a time. You know, and it's not just me building these relationships either. It's my staff building those relationships as well. And I'm the one that sets the tone in the office, and that kind of comes from the top down. I don't know if that explains it very well, or if I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of explaining it. But
I'm going to reach out to others offline so I understand why that would be different had you been appointed versus elected, but I appreciate your input.
Okay, wonderful. So I have Bob, and then David, and then Jane.
All right. I think that this discussion has been very important. It's been important for us to have this discussion. I have read David's counterpoint, five item counterpoints, and I think they were excellent and really quite convincing. I have heard Sheriff Krebs talk to us. I've heard people talk to us about how different we are, the size of our community, et cetera. And for that reason, it might surprise some of you, but for that reason, I'm now going to make a motion that we accept the original recommendation of the committee to keep this an elected position.
Okay.
I second.
Okay. There's a motion, a second. So two members of our group had asked that they be part of this. I stated pretty clearly that we were going to postpone the executive action, and several members of the public dropped off this call when I said that. I do not feel that it's appropriate, even though Bob, I thoroughly appreciate what you're saying right now. And I know that folks want to move forward, but we and your chair stated publicly 15 minutes ago that we would hold executive action until next Wednesday. I think it's very important that we do that. There's a motion and a second on the floor. If the motion is called, we have to take the vote. I would strongly urge us not to, because like I said, several members of the public dropped off, and one of our commissioners expressly in chat said, I have a hard stop at noon and I really want to be able to vote on this. And so for those reasons, and like I said, my plan would be to put this on the agenda first thing on Wednesday, and we can just take the vote. And unless some of us like to talk a lot, you know, we have that mentality that everything's been said, but not everybody's said it. Maybe we could try and put that aside and actually just take the vote. I think this deliberation is excellent, but I would strongly urge us not to go forward with the motion at this point in time for the reasons I stated.
Can I respond?
Please.
Mr. Chair, I hope that the motion can be continued on, but I am not, given what you have just stated, I'm not going to call for a vote at this time.
Okay. So you're withdrawing your motion?
If that's what it has to be, can the motion not survive to the next meeting?
Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor, so we're under discussion for that motion and second under the rules. If you withdraw your motion, then the motion is pulled back.
Well, I've got a second. I'll withdraw my second.
And I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay. And guys, I appreciate that. And like I said, I think there's some really good discussion going on, and we've got a few minutes to continue it today. So I have on the list, I had David, and then David, your counterpoints have come up a couple of times. So if you wanted to go through those when you comment now, I don't know what your comment was, but others have asked for that too. It would be valuable to hear those. And then I have Jane, and then
okay.
David.
Well, I was frustrated that I wasn't able to do it at the beginning after Bob's, but I suggested instead of reading them now, because we don't have much time, I'll send you an email and you can distribute it to everybody, including those who weren't here, who aren't here right now. Can I ask a question of Sheriff Krebs? Is he still on? Can I ask him a question?
Yes. Yeah.
I am.
So Ron, this issue of having to worry about the county council in effect micromanaging you if you were elected. Can you tell me, when you have and your deputies have to deal with a certain situation, if you were elected and you had a situation where you had to do some quick thinking and you had to say, aha, can I do this or can I not do this? Would the county council and the county manager tell me not to do this, even though I think it's my responsibility as a deputy to do this? Would you have possible cases if you were elected where you would be inhibited to taking timely action because you would be looking over your shoulder at how the county council and the county manager would react, whereas you wouldn't necessarily have that if you were an elected? Is that a problem that could come up that affects your timely reaction to situation?
What's that? Oh, yeah, I'm sure it can. I don't know what that point is. I'm sure, I mean, it happens. I know it happens. You see it everywhere else. But I'm sure it could happen. Is it happening? I don't know, because we don't face that.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to go to Jane. While you're getting off of mute, I just wanted to say I was going to actually ask, and this is another reason to delay the executive action until the very beginning of the next meeting, that the both pro and con from Maureen and Bob and David all be sent to the full commission again. So if you guys can do that, I don't want the task of forwarding it.
Kevin, I'm volunteering to take care of that. I'll send it to the full commission.
Thank you very much. Okay, Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just two things for Sheriff Krebs, whose time I think we all really appreciate today and appreciate hearing him. So Sheriff Krebs, I'm just curious to know if your office produces an annual report on, just crime, incidences of crime, types of crime, just how your office is functioning, et cetera. Is such a report produced? Is it publicly available on an annual basis, for example? So that's a question. And then the other is a request, and that is, as co-chair of the Justice and Equity Committee with Kyle Davies, we would really appreciate it if you and perhaps any of your deputies could attend our presentation next Thursday, because some of what we're proposing in terms of charter amendments is really intended to help us build community and an inclusive community and a safe community. And I think you and your colleagues would benefit from just being a part of our deliberations or our presentation and deliberations. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. The report, no, I don't put out an annual report. I do report to the council, and that's recorded, and I report to the town of Friday Harbor regularly. I don't put out a prepared report, so to speak. Not that I couldn't, but I mean, I can certainly look into that. It's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. I have Dick is the last hand that I see up for the discussion, and again we will continue this deliberation. Sorry, until Wednesday of next week. Dick, please.
I took my hand down because what I was going to propose as an alternative to Bob's motion was we just do a straw poll, but I don't think we need to do that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But I want to, and I have one other subject that I'll take 30 seconds for, but I want to thank wholeheartedly our sheriff for taking the time. I've actually gone through a very similar situation many years ago as an elected official, and Sheriff, this is not easy. And I think you have been professional and kind and thoughtful and open with your questions. And I think our community is lucky to have you, but I think our commission is particularly lucky to have you be so open to the questions and the back and forth today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I also want to say to Mike that I feel very lucky that you're on Orcas Island. Awesome. So thank you for your service as well. And thank you for your comments today. And thank you for serving on Orcas. With that, under new business, we had a runner-up candidate that we had looked at before the previous candidate, who is no longer going to take the position. I corresponded with her last night, and again this morning. I will be having a longer conversation with her tomorrow. My hope is that we can hire her very quickly. I think she is qualified. She doesn't have the same background that the last person had, so that the depth of some of the questions won't be there, but the drafting and doing that basic research we've talked about, we should be able to get that handled, and she's excited to come on. So I just think this is a great person, and I thank Commissioner Fuller and others who brought her to my attention. So my hope is that by next Wednesday, we will have this person able to be on the meeting with us and supporting us along with Catherine. And so Liz, I see your hand up, and then Kyle.
I was going to make a motion that we adjourn.
Can we see what Kyle has to say first? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really quickly, I've been trying to admit a public person by the name of Krista Davis with no luck. If any of you know that person and can help them for future times, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. I also admitted them at least 15 times. Their name kept popping up as needing to be admitted. So I'm not sure what the issue was. Krista, I'm sorry you weren't able to get on, but please let us know. I think it must have been on their end though, because the meeting seems to be working well. So with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn. And again, we're going to switch the agenda for next weekend, and this will be out so that the first item is the continuation of the deliberation with regard to the sheriff. I want to thank you all. I think this has been a really thoughtful conversation. So thanks a lot. Liz.
So in the minutes, Mylene posted that Krista works for the county in the, oh no, maybe you're talking not Krista. She just said she. So I didn't know, Mylene, if that was the person trying to get on is how I interpreted it.
Move to adjourn?
Yes, Krista.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So all those in favor of adjourning? Good.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Have a great day and weekend. Bye-bye.
Stop the recording.
Kevin,
Thanks,
scheduling.
guys. Appreciate it.
All done.
Kevin, I got a scheduling question.
Yeah,